Hello everyone, hope you all are doing well. I welcome you all to our webinar. This is episode 2 of the series focusing on BizTalk to Azure migration with 3 exclusive episodes to define your cloud adoption strategy. So in the previous episode, we had Kent Ware on speaking about on what Microsoft offers to facilitate BizTalk to Azure migration. So if you have missed the session, you can find the recording link available on our website, and I'll also be sharing it in the chat shortly. And in today's episode 2 of the series, we have Sandro Pereira to help us understand how enterprises migrate from BizTalk Server to Azure with real-time use cases. Sandro will be delving into topics like strategy options, best practices to accelerate migration, and more. And to give a heads up about Sandro Pereira is the head of integration at DevScope. In the past years, he has been implementing integration solutions both on-premise and cloud for several international clients, each with different scenarios using Microsoft Azure. So Sandro is also a technical reviewer of several books focused on integration, and is the author of the book BizTalk Mapping Patterns and Best Practices. He has been awarded MVP since 2011 for his contributions to the integration community. We are excited to have such an expert to be on board for this webinar series, and we are looking forward to the session. Hi, Sandro.
Hi, Ari. Thank you for the introduction. Everything about me is already been said, but yes, I'm the head of integration at DevScope. I'm a Microsoft MVP for the last 12 years. Start with the BizTalk MVP, and now I'm an Azure MVP. But my focus is on enterprise integration, both on-premise with BizTalk Server and the cloud with Azure Integration Service. This is what I do every day, every all year. And yeah, we have my contacts there, my personal blog. I recently got a badge also be one of the most active speakers on session night, so it was good. I'm also an instructor about trainings, about developer BizTalk trainings in Azure Logic App, Azure Integration Service. I do a lot of training course on GBI, CoBI, and DevScope. So if you need anything, just ping me. I wrote a book, 400 page about BizTalk, and I did co-author another book about migrating BizTalk Server 2020 to 2020, but this is not migration to Azure, it's migrating all BizTalk Server versions to the last version, that is 2020. And you find a lot of links there for my contributions on GitHub and so on and so forth. I promised my kid that I put the slide here. He normally tells me to go to work, get some money to, to buy some Legos. And I promise him all contribution that you guys made on Buy Me a Coffee is going to buy Legos for the kid. So I am a man that fulfill my word. That's a link. So if you want to contribute to my kids' collection of Legos, go ahead. Now for the agenda for today. The title is about case studies of migrating to Azure Integration Service. Well, I'm not going exactly to present a case study here because I cannot do that, but I'm going to describe the path to the migration success to actually you guys be comfortable and do migration from BizTalk to Azure Integration Service less painful as possible, okay? And we are going to start with choosing the correct migration drivers, okay? Expectations is really important. If you set the expectations correctly, you are not going to get disappointed. The path will be easier than just decide for wrong reasons what to migrate or not. Again, this is not going to be a session about are you going to migrate or not. You already decide to migrate, okay? So this is going to focus on that decision. What not to do, what to do, some best practice, and kind of at the end, some kind of learn. And then we're going to discuss that later on about it. So first, migration drivers. Stop using buzzwords like I'm going to migrate because I don't want to deal with migrations anymore, or I want to innovate, modernize, or is missing lack skills for BizTalk people. that are not the correct decision that you need to put on the table to migrate. Okay, if you go for that decisions, you will get really disappointed during the path of migration. Yes, they are minor reasons. All of these small justifications can be included, but they are not the drivers. Okay, and lack of skilled people is not an excuse. I can train them easily, and if I know other people that can train that easily, it's not an excuse. Starting with migrations, you are not going to face any migration for sure for a version to another version, but you still need to use migrations. Okay, don't think that you are going to the Azure and everything is it's up and ready and no worries at all with migration and so on. Azure is always evolving, changing every day, and you have to fulfill and be ready to run as fast as Azure goes. Okay, you have to be dynamic. You have sometimes to think about designing the solutions, your solutions, to be designed for changes, be adapt to solutions that they can change easily and evolve easily. And yeah, for example, I'm going to give you two examples. Integration service environment, ICE, that is a dedicated environment, logic app consumptions, is going to be retired next year. So if you did invest a lot of in your organization about migrating to ICE, now you have to migrate again. So you have to migrate to logic app consumption or logic app standard. Azure functions, and this is not this. I'm going to talk about Azure integration services as a whole, no. But there are other services on Azure that suffer the same. But just to give you some example, Azure functions v2 and v3 are going to be deprecated and no longer supported. So you have to migrate to v4. Okay, some of these migrations are easy to fulfill. Some of them are not. So ICE integration, depending on what you are going to intend to do, is going to be a little more challenge or not. So you see that if you put the drivers for moving from BizTalk to Azure, no more migrations, you get disappointed. So again, setting the correct expectations, setting the correct drivers will facilitate that path. Okay. Innovation, modernization. This is something that companies tell often about. I'm going to move from BizTalk because I want to innovate, modernize my solutions, and so on and so forth, like the buzzwords, nice fancy words. Innovation and modernization is not related with technology at all. You can modernize your integration solutions in BizTalk, in AS4, and in Azure. So for me, innovation happens when you create something with more value than that what exists. We are innovating, we are producing more value on the integration. And then we see that we are going to migrate the BizTalk solution from BizTalk to Azure, and it stays the same as is with files, CSVs, and XML. So again, this is using a different tool, doing the same stuff using different tools. Again, I'm not saying that this is bad, okay? Still valid, and if it works, awesome. But this is not innovation, just changing from one side to the other. You may say that, well, I move because I don't want to waste a lot of money in licensing just to do file transfers. Awesome. That's a good driver, not innovation, because this is, for me, it's not innovation. It's doing the same stuff using a different technology. Okay. Again, skilled people, it's hard to find. I'm going to tell you that it's going to be hard to find skilled people also in Azure. Okay. Enterprise integration is not easy. Okay. We are in the middle of everything, everyone, no? Even if you came from the background of BizTalk like me, You know that the fault is always about the middleware, and we are men that we need to troubleshooting and find all the issues and point to other direction and so on and so forth. We have to know about communication with SAP, Oracle, AS400. We have to know a lot of protocols, API, all of this stuff. So integration is not that easy. You can say that the learning curve of knowing Logic App is a little small than BizTalk. I agree with that, okay? But you'll still find some issues about finding skilled people. And skilled people, you find it by training, unfortunately, okay? It's not a fancy technology also. We live, if you are working on this space, you know that is not the fancy technologies like Power Apps or Power Automate, Power BI, AI that now everyone wants to be a data science is because they sell a lot. Okay, they go to the business to managers and they say a lot. Managers only know us if integration fails, and then they know our number to call. So we live on that wall, and it's not that easy to find skilled people. And you find a lot of people that knows how to work with logic apps and Azure functions and API management, but because the entry point varies slow and small, so they can actually do all of this stuff, but then they miss the most important concepts inside Logic App, and actually the value is not that high. The work they produce is not that value as a skilled people that know all of these integration concepts and needs that people that work on this space. Okay, so again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you are not shouldn't migrate or not. Again, this is about migration. But if you find and if you decide about the correct paths, the correct reasons about migration, you understand some difficulties that you may have and you need to adapt constantly, the path to this migration is going to be easier. You will not get frustrated with setbacks that may happen, and they will happen for sure. Missing features, missing time. So again, it's not going to. Some companies have a small footprint in BizTalk and that can easily migrate to Azure. Other companies has a big footprint in BizTalk, and it's going to be not easy to migrate. I'm not going to say that it's going to be hard or impossible. It is possible, but sometimes this requires a lot of testing, approval from the business, and it's going to take time. Okay, it's going to be a process. Sometimes we can go in different directions that we're going to speak about soon. Find the right reasons, select why, and again, go for it. What not to do now? Stop comparing BizTalk to Logic Apps, for example. Okay, stop comparing BizTalk to Azure. At some point, they are different tools. Okay, especially I see a lot of people. Let's migrate BizTalk to Logic App. We can't. Okay, again, I'm tired to say this, but Logic App is just a workflow. Okay, BizTalk is not a workflow. BizTalk is a platform, and we have to migrate BizTalk to Azure Integration Service and to Azure itself. Okay, so it's not one technology or one service. It's a bunch of services that we are going to use in different ways and combine them together. Okay, because if you say, and again, this is expectations. Okay, setting the correct expectations. If I'm going to a customer and say, I'm going to migrate your BizTalk to the Logic app, and my client says, yeah, yes, awesome, done, do it. And then I start saying, oh, you need to buy an API management. Oh, you need to provide app service plan. Oh, you need to provide me as functions and a key vault. And again, it's going to say, what else? And you say that you are going to migrate to Logic apps. You see the point, no? Expectations to the clients, expectations for your companies, they need to be set properly. Otherwise, you are going to be frustrated during this process, and This is about kind of having a good path to the cloud. Stop to believe that there is a magic button. That isn't, okay? You cannot go to BizTalk and say, go migrate, that's it. Even as is, it's going to be migrated. It's not. Again, it's a different platform. And we're going to see a little bit about this soon. So I don't believe that story at all. Do not plan for big bang migrations. Azure is always changing. Okay, you cannot have a roadmap anymore about I'm going to migrate the solution in this next 6 months and then go to the cloud. 6 months on the cloud, a lot of things happens, new stuff happens. You have to go fast. You have to continuous migrating. Okay, so kind of small delivers and produce some value to the cloud, and then start discontinue some on premise and go fast. Okay, big bang migration is too difficult. It's not going to work, and depending on the size of the footprint of BizTalk, it's going to be a nightmare. Okay, normally I say when I'm migrating a whole version of BizTalk to a new one, I can migrate these in 1 week or two. Okay, let's say 2016 to 2020, piece of cake. Okay, just compile. That's it. I will lose a lot of time just approvals, testing from the business. That is where all the everything stops. Okay, so because even do a side-by-side migration of BizTalk, and that's way easier than migrate to Azure. We are going to spend a lot of time doing tests with the business approval and say, okay, ready to go. Awesome. You can imagine that it's going to take more time doing that on the cloud. So manage that teams, different teams have the same agenda, free agenda to test all of this stuff. You have to test point to point, and sometimes we have a mix of 2, 3 teams, and that's going to be a nightmare. So it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to do a big bang migration and now have all of these ready to test all of this stuff. It's not going to work at all. Okay, so do not plan big bang migrations, and do not jump on the cloud without a plan. Okay, so so say, okay, let's migrate, start it. Okay, you can do that, but you're going to lose a lot of time and have a lot of frustration doing that. So migrate BizTalk to Azure. You have to consider BizTalk. The main service, of course, is Azure integration servers that are composed with Logic App, Azure Functions, API management, service bus, and event hubs or grid. I don't know. But you have to consider Azure also as a whole. Okay. So I can do some kind of exercise here, message routing, and you see that message routing in BizTalk. Of course, we have the message box, but we have to put different stuff in Azure. We don't have a message box anymore. So service queue, service bus, queues topics, in some cases event grid, API management. Of course, we can do SQL, but not the best options. Schemas, yes, we can use schemas. We can use an Azure integration and schemas about XML schemas. You can use Azure integration account. Nowadays, you can use Logic App standard. Of course, it supports schemas, but you can think out of the box and create, for example, a storage account with Azure Functions API and a Logic App, and you have a way also to have schemas, XML schemas in Logic App consumption without an Azure integration account. That is a little bit more expensive. Maps, again, the same as schemas, the same concepts, the same service that you can use. When we have pipelines in BizTalk, they normalize the entry of the message. If you receive a CSV, you need to translate them to XML because BizTalk works with XML process and then convert again to the expect type of message of the end system. Well, we don't have pipelines in Azure. A Logic App can be a pipeline. It can serve, it can act as a pipeline. An API management, for example, can also be, in some cases, act as a pipeline, or can do some functions or API app, depending on your scenario. okay? There are a lot of adapters in BizTalk, and we can create a lot of custom adapters. And in some cases, we have IaaS and API management on top of BizTalk. Well, adapters, we have a bunch of many more connectors. They are not the same, but they act as the same. So they are the piece that connect to the end systems, and we have a lot more in Azure. But in BizTalk, we focus more on enterprise integration. We still can find a lot of connectors in Azure about enterprise connectivity like SAP, SQL, and so on and so forth. Can even work with mainframes. Logic App also can act as a connector in some cases. API management also, Azure functions, so going by code, and even in some cases you can create custom connectors. So not easy, not difficult to migrate. Orchestrations, yes, we have Logic App. Okay, so that's a perfect match. Orchestration, we go to Logic App standard or consumption. But an Azure function can act also as an orchestration. We can also do some kind of C# code inside our orchestrations, and some part of the business of the logic inside C# code. We can do also in Azure functions, API apps, and so on and so forth. Well, we don't have a concept of business rules yet in Azure, but we can do these kind of emulate this kind of service with Azure functions, SQL, custom code, BAM. Yes, we can use. You still don't have the same, but we can use log analytics. We can create some custom SQL, Power BI, so we can try to do the emulate different kind of service on Azure. Okay, tracking. Well, I have the slides wrong, but tracking that we can enable and disable tracking at any artifact in BizTalk. Well, we don't have the same look and feel, but we have the run history. We can track properties. We can put in storage account, we can put in log analytics, app insights. We can do all of this stuff in different ways. Okay. ADI, we have out-of-the-box capabilities about creating partners agreement. We can use integration account to use this same service also in Azure. Rosetta Net, yes, we have Rosetta Net support, kind of a little about HL7, but most of the stuff are there. Okay. In BizTalk, we have this kind of concept of about creating our applications without focus too much on the configurations. We create, and then we create the ports, and then you do the bindings and associate all of this stuff. We don't have the same look and feel in Azure, but we can still do that in DevOps pipelines and configure all the connectivities to the correct environments using CI/CD process. Okay. SSO, keep the secrets of BizTalk. We have Keyboard for that. You can use SQL, of course, and we have, in some cases, app configuration. So we have a lot of service that can act as the same. Cross-reference, we don't have cross-reference, not too much used anymore in BizTalk, but there is a feature there. But we can do the same with SQL, to be honest. So it's not that difficult to implement. And about configuration, so BizTalk you can put a lot of configurations in config files, regedit, business rule, SSO. All of these can contain application configurations, kind of key values. Well, depending on the secrets or not non-confidential data, we can put on keyboards, app configurations, and so on and so forth. So kind of, yeah, it's not the same. You have to use a lot of service, but you have the same. You can easily translate that to Azure. Okay, but again, there is no magic button. Okay, Microsoft create a tool that is Azure integration migrating tool. I think luckily they stop investing too much on this tool. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it. It's a good tool for having an idea of what to use, documentation, but I'm not a big fan of this tool for migrating. Okay, again, there are different ways to do. There are different platforms. There are different ways to do this migration, and sometimes it has some cost oriented. Okay, In BizTalk, we don't care about when we're developing. We don't care about cost. Okay, so I have all the features. If I have BizTalk Enterprise, I have all the features. I have SSO, I have business rules, I have orchestrations, I have everything there. Okay, in Azure is different. No, do I'm going to large cap consumption because I'm going to pay for consumption. I'm going to large cap standard because, well, I have different needs. I need to connect with BNet. I need to be internal, on-premise, whatever. Okay, then I'm going to standard, and that will have a cost because I need to run as app service plan. No? I'm going to use an API management. If I go to kind of a standard, or I'm going to enterprise, service bus, premium or standard. Okay, well, I have a good story. So I have a client, and for a small proof of concept, but it was a real project, but it was kind of the first proof of concept migrating some stuff to Azure. They built the first solution, and when I was there, and they asked me so for a kind of review, they were using Event Apps Service Bus Premium and Large Cap, and it was, well, it was good. No, the problem was that the cost was high. You know, everything was premium. Start to some questions about, well, what is, are we going to use a lot of these? Volume is high. It's critical or not? It was about 10 messages per day, not that critical. So why you are using premium? Okay, and then we start redesigning the solution, and we stop doing event terms because, well, we have to have a service bus premium to use event driven. So we start using a service bus basic, so 20K to 20 euros. It's a lot of difference. And we have to, instead of doing an event grid solution, we did a pool, the message, again, 20 messages, non-critical. So we have to design our solution based also on the cost. So we are not going to be kind of, I want to use this because, yeah, this is fancy and good, but at the end, it's the customer that's going to pay, and sometimes a lot of money. So here in Azure, we also have to keep these cost oriented in mind, so we design our solution. So magic button doesn't work because you need to adapt in certain circumstances to one needs and the another to another needs. So yeah, keep that in mind, and take also this opportunity to redesign your solutions. Okay, so well, sometimes we have a BizTalk solutions that they are 10 years old. Why they were created that way, I don't care. It was 10 years ago, no? And we just keep migrating, and that's it. Yeah, now that we need to do some kind of refactoring, because you need to do some kind of refactoring to migrate from BizTalk to Azure, it's time and a good opportunity for us to think also about, can we change this? Can we improve that? Can we innovate this stuff? Okay, are we going to use a CSV? Because can we use JSON today? This is a pool strategy. Can we do a event-driven strategy? All of these you should put on the table, and take this opportunity also to innovate, not just simple migrate. Okay, and then you bring more value on this migration. Okay? Again, Big Bang is too risky. It doesn't work. It demanded a lot of period of testing, acceptance, and everything changed, and changed fast in Azure. And again, as is migration, yeah, it works sometimes. It is sometimes a need that we need to do because there is a requirement to discontinue something fast, but it's not going to produce the correct value or more value on having this new platform for you to take profit on the business and deliver more value to the business. Okay, design stuff to change and design to be evolve in a fast situation. Okay, decouple solutions, they are easier and they are more adapt to change than couple solutions. Okay, so think about that also. What else? Again, don't jump to migrations without having the proper foundations prepared. Okay, so when I mean foundations, it's about, well, there are a lot of things I plan to migrate, but when we migrate, you know that some stuff we have out of the box for free in BizTalk, like tracking, kind of end-to-end tracking. You don't have that in Azure. Okay, so if you start migrating and then you start saying, okay, how can I track this end to end? And I'm not saying tracking just logic app. Actually, you go migrate to Azure, service or messages are going to enter in the API management. It's going to a logic app. It's going to be called a function, and it goes to a different service bus and so on and so forth, and goes, yeah, all of these, because it's going to be your integration platform. How can you track these end to end? There is nothing out of the box for you to do that. You can track the logic app, you can track the API management, but I mean end-to-end tracking. You have to build that. So first think about this. Create these foundations, create strategies about using. So what I'm going to use to replace SSO, where do I going to keep my configurations? I'm going to use SSO, I'm going to use a SQL, I'm going to use app configuration, I'm going to use the peaks of these. But you prepare the strategies, okay? Again, if you think that this is BizTalk, okay? This is the complexity of BizTalk. BizTalk is building a lot of layers, Windows servers, Active Directory, because it runs on Windows servers. It has to have Active Directory accounts and groups for permissions, IaaS to receive message, networking, clustering, virtualization, hardware, SQL, MES-DTC, and BizTalk server. It is many layers, okay? There are different roles acting in BizTalk. So we have the sysadmin that monitors the machines, the network, well, IaaS, updates, everything, okay? You have the BizTalk administrator that deals with admin the platform, but in concept about BizTalk server itself, not going to install Windows updates, neither SQL updates, but it's going to install, for example, BizTalk updates. It's going to install the applications, configure the applications, database administration, and network administration. It is a team effort in BizTalk. Okay, don't think that is going to be different in Azure. You are not one man show that I'm going to control everything just because you don't have servers anymore. Okay, you still have all of these roles. You still need Active Directory on Azure because permissions and access different resources. You still need kind of a sysadmin because no one is going, or at least my clients, I'm not going to a client and they are not going to allow me to create an app service plan or a new subscription or a new resource group because I want. No, they create that. I ask them to create them. I will explain why we need that, and they will create that or not depending on if they accept or not. Okay, we still need networking. Okay, because if you're going to connect on premise, you are probably going to have an express route. I don't know how to create that for sure. I'm going to ask a network expert, a BNet. If you're running on a logic app standards and want to connect, so you need a BNet. All of these stuff. Is networking involved. Of course, we are not going to install updates and so on and so forth. That's not the intention, but still, it is a team effort. You have to define roles, activities, and all of these. You have to build the platform. Okay, kind of. I'm going to use one subscription. Too many different subscriptions, resource groups, not resource groups. All of these. This is what I mean with the foundation. Start preparing everything that is needed for you to start migrating your bespoke solutions. It doesn't need to be everything from there and then start migrating. Basics, start and improve it, but you get the point. Okay. So what to do? Evaluate. That's the first. Okay, evaluate what you have, plan for the migration, and then implement. Okay, decide on, and on this evaluation plan, decide what applications to migrate, or the order of migrations by business needs, by complexity, by the size. Well, my advice is start with something easier, not going to most complex, not the simplest one, but kind of intermediate is going to be the starting point, because then you're going to get the look and feel and what you can do, what can improve, and it's going to, each time you're going to migrate, it's going to improve for sure. Okay, so but it's up to you to decide this order. Okay, it can be a side by side if you have many team members and do collaborate work and migrate all of this stuff. But again, you have to have a plan. Okay, decide if it makes sense to migrate or stay or go hybrid. Okay, again, this is not an intention of saying do not migrate, but a recent scenario of mine. So we are going to migrate BizTalk. I have a client that we are going to migrate BizTalk. Out of the questions, we already decide that, okay? But there is a big but. It's going to take a little, okay? Nowadays, security is kind of in the top of every company, because even this client got an attack recently, and they are using a whole version of BizTalk. They don't want to be out of support. They want to be kind of Windows apps to apps, all the securities, updates, all of this stuff. So we have a problem now about time to go live on Azure and BizTalk out of support. So now we are putting kind of in the table to migrate BizTalk to 2020, because it's an easy migration. It's going to take 1 month, 2 months to migrate this stuff, but everything is supported features, support update features, all of this stuff. And then but as is without any improvement, okay? And then we go to migrate to Azure, just because kind of security is well important these days. We are on the table for that. In some cases, well, again, migration path is going to take a little, okay? Sometimes we can go hybrid. We start putting some stuff on the cloud, and some of these may stay still on premise and go start and do this hybrid integration. We are preparing the Azure. We are going to Azure, but kind of in a good pace, in our pace, and we do this, start doing from on-premise to start hybrid. Some of them go full Azure, that's for sure, depending on the complexity. But everything here, you can put this in the equation and consideration for you guys, okay? It helps facilitate the process of migration, okay? Again, success is what we want to achieve. So yeah, take these decisions also. I'm not saying do not migrate. Yes, do, but we have different strategies here, okay? And again, you have to remind that this is BizTalk. PubSub, 100% PubSub. A message entering in a receive port, it goes to a receive location that contains an adapter, a pipeline to normalize the message. We can apply maps or not. It goes to a message box, always goes to the message box. And from there, it can be subscribed, but for an orchestration, do some business logic, go back to the message box and do the opposite side about the send port. You have all the service there. And we need to change to this, okay? API management, logic app, API app, function app, event hub, service bus, and we're missing a lot of them here, okay? So we have to have a good plan. We need to decide, and this kind of plan, this foundation about what service to use, what is the strategy you want. First code approach, no code, low code approach, cost oriented approach. In some cases, a mixed consideration of all of these. In some cases, client says, I'm going to use logic app standard. And in some cases, why you are always only using logic app standard, okay? Well, you can use both of them, logic app consumption and logic app standards. It depends on so if you have a solution that's going to consume 10 messages per day, it's not going to be critical. Why put in a logic app standard? Only if there is a need for BNet integration and so on and so forth. Yes, Okay, yeah, good reason. Otherwise, it's going to be cheaper, and you have the same capabilities in large cap consumption, pay per use. Okay, all of these you put on the station, you decide what to use and not to use. So if there's kind of non-critical, no need for BNets and so on, we can start, and we are going to use large cap consumption. If there are other needs, then we are going to use large cap standard. If there is a need for low, kind of high performance, really fast, probably are going to skip large cap. Okay, going functions, API management, I don't know. Okay, depending on the scenario, because, well, we can go fast in BizTalk. We can put the orchestration running 200 milliseconds for sure. Okay, I've done that, and it's not going to be that easy to do that inside Logic App. It's not code also about doing that. So if you really need that, probably you have to choose a different strategy. Okay. So yeah, plan the foundations, decide what to use, decide the patterns, kind of fire and forget, decoupling application, APIM strategy, securities, monitoring, and so on. Kind of prepare these basics, and then let the fun begin. Start migration, everything. Okay. I have some scenarios here. So when I say documenting and plan, okay, for example, one of the tools that we can use in BizTalk to kind of generate this is BizTalk Documented. This will produce a technical documentation about your solutions. And you see that I have my orchestrations, my receipt ports. I know that which kind of adapter I'm using, service bus, and so on. But I also can go and see that kind of the workflow overview. Okay, that gives me some kind of technical stuff. Again, I have to know what is there, so I know how to migrate these to Azure. I have the schemas that I use. This kind of documenting, of course, I can go always to the source code and check. But I also, for example, produce this kind of documentation that is kind of a visual diagrams, and we have all this correlation between what enters and what goes, and all of these connectivity between service and orchestration and so on. So I have a complete overview what I need, but in an abstract way. Okay, even I can document all the process in an easier way. So I'm not going to put here that I'm going to create a variable, I'm going to set up the variable, and no, I'm going to do an abstraction and kind of a flow diagram in abstract way with the key stuff, so I can understand all of this. Okay, and take to the business and make all of these. How can we improve it? Okay, because you have to know what is there. Okay, you have to know what is there and go to the cloud. Now, what you need to know also that we came from a world about one tool. If you are using BizTalk, we use Visual Studio. That's it, more or less. Okay, well, we have BAM, we have tracking profile, we have business tools, but that is just small tools. For developing, we have one tool, Visual Studio. That's it. Okay, not anymore. We are going to pass from this to multiple tools. And again, nothing wrong, just setting up expectations. Okay, otherwise you get disappointed and frustrated, like I was a little in the beginning. So, for example, if you have consumption, well, you have to use Visual Studio 2019 or Visual Studio 2017 if you want to use the mapping. If you're going to standard, we have to use Visual Studio Code. If you're going to use as functions, well, I think you can go for the code also, or you have to use Visual Studio 2020 or something like this. Because the new runtime version all supports kind of Visual Studio 2020. I think 20 or 9. It's too many versions. You get the point. Okay, you can use the Azure portal for sure. Okay, there are a lot of things that you can do in Azure portal, but The problem with the Azure portal is the lack of CI/CD process. So if you have to implement different strategies to do the kind of CI/CD. So using the Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code is going to be easier to perform this kind of stuff. And for speaking about CI/CD, we have a lot of different tools also to work, and depending on your skills, about DevOps, Biceps, Terraform. Because when you develop a solution in Azure, we have the logic app. Yes, we have code, some kind of code, no? If you use an API management, yes, we have policies and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a code. As the functions, yes, you have C# or PowerShell, depending on the function you are creating, you have code. But in a service bus, you create topics, queues, filters, and that's it. Okay, it's just kind of right-click, create, right-click, create, and that's it. There is no code behind the scenes. No. The problem is that when you start deploying all of this stuff, no one is going to allow you to go to your production subscription and right-click and create all of this stuff. You have to do by CI/CD process. So you have to know how to create a topic, a queue, everything by Bicep scripts or Terraform scripts, all of this stuff. Okay, so it's different mind to create all of this stuff, and lesson learned. I've been there, so yeah, I was never play with Bicep scripts until I had the need to create all of these because I was not allowed to go to other environments than dev environment. So if I want to deploy to Q&A, test, and production, everything has to be in a scripted way, in a CI/CD way. So I had to learn and get new skills. Okay, so keep that in mind also. Define, again, baselines. Define your Azure policies. Subscription resource group policy. This is important from day one. Okay, it's nothing that we create an application in BizTalk and we can move artifact from one another. We can rename the BizTalk application. We can rename the ports and everything works fine. Azure doesn't work a little about this. So it's good for you to have some kind of strategy and policy about subscriptions, resource groups, naming conventions is really important, tag policies, security access policy, and so on and so forth. So subscriptions, you can have one simple subscription, of course, but there are big companies that they have different regions, they have different departments, different companies, so they need to divide costs and the proper cost controlling and isolation. Probably having different subscriptions is the way to go. Even there is a subscription that is dev test. So yeah, if you use this kind of subscriptions, this is for non-production environments. In some servers, you get lower cost than in production. Remember that, for example, BizTalk, you pay for non-production environment, you pay only the hardware. No, you don't pay licensing. In Azure, if you want a dev environment and you want a service bus premium, you still pay from that service bus premium. So using this dev test subscription, you pay less. Okay. In some cases, I'm just giving a service bus example, but can be not really a good example. Naming conventions and access. So yes, give a proper naming convention because monitoring that and managing on the daily basis is going to be a nightmare. And you have to do a good naming convention for everything, queues, topics, connectors, all of these. So implement some strategy about service that's going to be divided by hyphens, non-hyphens, because in some cases different resources have different restrictions about namings. How to scale, for example, in VMs, you can put 01, 02, and so on. Adding prefix about resource, projects, and descriptions, all of these. For example, this is a sample here. And you decide all uppercase, lowercase, Pascal case. There is no a rule for that. it's important for you to create your naming convention policies and apply that naming convention policy. That is, it has to fit your needs and your requirements. And the rest is, I don't care. There is no better naming convention than one and the other. Okay, if it fits to you, go for that. But keep that in a consistent way. Okay. For example, logic app consumption. Well, if you want kind of divide by applications, the only way to do that is by kind of create a resource group that act as an application, like a BizTalk application, and then you can put all the ADI brokers there, for example, on that resource group, and you have kind of isolation. On logic app standard is different. Well, it's just that you can avoid that resource group isolation because the logic app standard is already an isolation. So you can create a different name, and the workflows itself, it's all everything that is related with the API broker. So it's different. Connectors, okay? Remember that all connectors are a SQL 1, SQL 2, service bus 1. Give a decent name, otherwise it's going to be a nightmare to understand what is that. So no one will remember and no one knows what is SQL 1, SQL 2, okay? The service bus is the same. So all of these strategies, you should keep that in mind. It will help you a lot in the long run, okay? I'm keen about this naming convention, and I'm right about being keen because that will help you a lot frustrations in the future, okay? And again, consolidate some shared service, centralized logging, error handling, or error extraction. Getting an error from a logic app is not that simple at all. You can create different rules. I have some kind of in my blog, but yeah, you have to keep that in mind. There are shared services that you can use, isolate them, and reuse it in your process, okay? Try to avoid implementing some common BizTalk patterns, okay, like convoys, sequence convoys, message sequence. This is going to be, it's a disaster in BizTalk. It's going to be a disaster in Azure. Try to innovate this, try to implement it in a different way if possible, okay? Pooling, for example. In some cases, yes, pooling is good. Some cases, we can go to event-driven situations. It's going to get new modern solutions and so on, okay? Try and forget in some cases. Not really easy to do in BizTalk because everything is persistent in the database, okay? And do not forget the integration basics. That it's about skilled people, okay? Persistent, guarantee deliver, error handling, debatching, parallel processing. What is the synchronous and synchronous processing? Re-entry process and retries, okay? You get surprised how many people I already spoke and trained about logic apps and they don't know these concepts, okay? These are important concepts that you need to be aware on the enterprise integration, okay? I have a bunch of best practices there you can find on Serverless 360 blog. Go there and have a look, send me your feedback and learn. Learn is important, okay? Go see what is there. After it's deployed, after it's going to production, after it's running, go analyze that. Reflect what you are doing and try to learn from mistakes, learn from failures. If it fails, try to understand why and fix that. Okay, for me, failures is critical. If it fails, I have to address that failure. Otherwise, I have to control it. Okay, and I have I have a good friend in Cordell that is a kind of security expert now, and it speaks a lot about blue team and red team. That blue team try to defend and the red team try to attack. Play with this also in your integrations. Try to make mistakes, force errors, to control all of this stuff. Security, try to attack if it's secure or not. So you can also play with these kind of concepts of red team and blue team to improve all of your integration. And finally, because we are in the hour, try to think out of the box a little. Okay, throw errors, for example, in Logic App. There is no way for you to do that in a simple way. You can throw an error using another Logic App, for example. Okay, sounds stupid, at least in my head, but you can do that. Get errors message. Again, it's not that simple. You can use a Logic App to get the error message of another Logic App, proper error message of that logic app. Why I'm saying you can use one logic app to do that, you can do it the same, because but if you isolate these, you can in all your logic app call these and do not implement the same logic everywhere. Dynamic connectors, we know that sometimes the connectors in logic app, they are not dynamic at all. They have to be kind of fixed connectivity. We can create the concept of a logic app using a dynamic connectivities. Also monitoring, tracking, again, you have different ways to do that. You have to think a little about out of the box to implement your correct ways to do that. And yes, for that is all that I have today. I hope you like it, and if you have any questions, I have free time to go a little out of time to respond that. So Q&A.
Thank you, Sandro, for the session. So, like you mentioned, we have a question from Mohammed Ilyas. So I'll read out the question for you.
Yeah.
How many logic apps are recommended to run in single app service plan? Do we need to create multiple app service if the message volume is higher?
For sure, yes. Depending on your app service plan, depending on your volume, but there is no precise number about this. No, I can have 100 logic apps in the same app service plan and everything works fine. I can have only one and kind of I need to scale up my app service plan depending on the volume, depending on the complexity. You can go, but it's something that you can scale easy, kind of go, start using and start growing by your needs. So I'm always trying in my projects start small and get higher, because if that's a problem with BizTalk, we need to think about peaks. So I normally consume 10 messages, but I know that there is a day that I need to consume 1,000 messages. So I have to prepare my infrastructure to 1,000 messages. Okay, not in Azure. I think about the codes, and then I can auto scale, for example, or adjust the scaling in an automated way, but there is no proper response for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandro. We have another question from Paul Bars. If all your primary systems are on-prem, would you migrate to Azure?
If my, well, I'm going to say my personal opinion. If all my servers or service is on premise, no, I'm not going to migrate to Logic App, at least for now. Okay, so I'm going to stay in BizTalk, and again, there is no wrong for me on doing that. BizTalk is still there for at least 2030, 2030. So still a long road to know. We still don't actually know if there is going to be another version or not. Not that critical for me at the moment. Also, I'm not afraid of that. I know that I'm from the time that BizTalk is dead since 2004. At some point, everyone dies. Like BizTalk is going to die for sure. I'm going to die for sure, but I'm not worried too much about that. And I have clients that's going to stay in BizTalk because it's on premise to on premise. So if you are good for controlling that hardware updates and so on and so forth, I'm going to stay there, because Logic App standard can work the same, but it's still I think it's still growing. So I'm going at the moment, my personal opinion, I'm going to stay in business.
Thank you. So we have the next question from Shrikant. Can we have batching of messages in Logic App standard workflows?
Good question. I know that we can have in Logic App consumption. I assume that yes, but if not, to be honest, I didn't try that feature. But I assume that exists. If not, because there is a small parity, a lack of parity between yet a little between what is consumption and is standard. But I know for a fact that Microsoft is working hard and very hard on reduce that gap, small gap. There's still small gap between what is consumption and standard. So even if it's not yet at the moment, you can use it, or you can use an hybrid approach also on Azure. some stuff in consumption, and some stuff in standard. Okay, so you can do still play with this concept. Okay, but 100% I'm not sure if there is the batch support for standard.
So the next question is from Ravindranath Chilamkuri. Can Logic Apps run on on-premises with Azure Arc for hybrid or on-premises only scenarios?
Well, out of my league for now. I never use Arc. Well, the goal is that Logic App standard runs everywhere. Okay, I'm not sure there is still a licensing for Logic App standard using in containers or something like that. I think it's on the roadmap to do that. The goal is Logic App to work also on premise, and I assume that. And I also some times ago I read an article about Arc and Logic App, but I didn't yet implement nothing running Logic App standard on premise. So I'm not the best guy to respond that question.
Yeah, so that's the questions that we have received till now. Audience, if you have any questions, you can still put forth the questions in the question section.
Meanwhile, make sure also that you have kind of several notes there. You have the link, a lot of good resource about a lot of contributors. Some of them are former Microsoft MVPs, now Microsoft product groups. And to be noticed that Integrate 2023 is almost there. The oldest Microsoft integration conference in the world, for sure. It's going to take place in London in June 5, 7, I think. So it's a good opportunity for a lot of networking. Meet the Microsoft PMs responsible for delivering the service. There will be there for sure 10, 12 Microsoft MVPs like me on the session. So if you are not familiar, go and check about this amazing event that happens every day for the last almost 11 years. And if there is no more questions, for me it's all. It was a pleasure to be here. And if you are a little shy, I want to make some private questions, just send me an email. I'll try to to reply to your question.
Yeah. So Sandro, we guess the questions. We don't receive any questions now, so we are done with the Q&A session. Like Sandro mentioned, the attendees, we have a super early bird offer for 25% offer on our integrate tickets. So we will be posting the link in the chat so you can access it. And also you have a unique coupon code for the attendees in the follow-up email for the additional discounts. So you'll be receiving the coupon code in the follow-up email. So Sandro, thank you so much for the session. It was a very
Pleasure was mine.
insightful session, and the next follow-up session in this series would happen next week, and the registrants could participate in that. So that is being conducted by it is being presented by Lex and Michael Stephenson. So you will have the topic based on addressing the operational challenges in BizTalk to Azure migration. Yeah, so that's the update for us to the attendees, and thank you so much, Sandro, for your time and knowledge.
Thank you.